We have a huge San Jose Sharks trade update as Mike Grier is going to be active, and a recent report from Dave Pagnotta reveals multiple details about Mikael Granlund, including linking him to the Dallas Stars and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But not only that, KC, we also have an update on a potential Mikael Granlund extension and some conflicting reports about that. There is a lot we got to break down, and breaking down the implications on the Sharks and the trade packages from the Leafs or Stars that could come back. All that coming up on this episode of Sharks Digest. But guys, before we get into the video, we are just over 500 subscribers away from 1,000. We are so close. And even if just a fraction of you watching this video hit the free subscribe button down below to stay up to date on all the latest Sharks content, we can hit it before the Four Nations. It's a huge goal for us. Thank you so much for being here. Casey, let's get right into this video. And we got to start with Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period. In a little video today, he was talking about a bunch of teams, trade rumors, extensions, stuff like that. And there was a focus on a segment for the San Jose Sharks. Now, there's some stuff here that you're seeing about Ferraro, about Cody Ceci. We're not going to get into those in this video. We'll probably get into those in another one. So keep an eye out. That's why you got to subscribe. But there's a few things here, including linking them to the Stars and Maple Leafs. We're going to get into that in just a bit, so stick around for that. But I want to start, Casey, with the fact that he says that the Sharks have had loose contract talks with Mikael Granlund, but the expectations that they will trade him. Basically just said Granlund's camp has spoken to the Sharks within the past month. And, well, Grier has said a few things about this here, and if we dive into this first quote, he said, "It's important for me to have an open mind about where we're going and what another team might be willing to offer for one of our players and weigh it against the value of keeping those players around and having them with our group," clearly indicating that, there is a value to keeping a guy like Granlund around versus trading him. And he also said we're not just in the mode of gathering picks for the sake of gathering picks. Now, while KC, it certainly seems like it's more likely that Granlund gets moved, it makes a lot of sense. He's having a great year. But what do you think about the idea of him sticking around in a San Jose Sharks uniform? I feel like most fans probably want to see some value come back for a trade, but I don't think it's that crazy to ship him out. Or
No,
to keep him around, I should
I
say.
don't think it's a bad idea for him to stick around either. I think he's doing a great job at mentoring a young centerman in Macklin Celebrini, and we're seeing the success he's having just by learning from this guy in the day-to-day experience in the locker room. So I think he adds a lot of value. Yes, as a point getter to this this team, he has 44 points on the year at 32 years old. So you are going to get a decent return for him in a trade, but I don't think it is a bad idea to keep him either. I think that, yes, you would get a lot of value for him on the trade market, but I think he does add value to this team off the ice as well, to where you can see him sticking around here. But Josh, there are some conflicting reports about this signing, because obviously Dave Pagnotta saying there's early talks happening, but Mike Grier also saying he hasn't talked to anybody or any of the UFAs about any contracts. So it's very confusing about what's happening. All we know is that there are talks around Mikael Granlund, whether it's a trade, whether it's a signing, but he is definitely on the top of Mike Grier's list, and for good reason, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great player. You got to consider what's best for your team's future. And he's 32, so he probably doesn't fit the timeline long term. But like you said, Casey, there's value with him being a locker room guy too. But all that to say, it's not likely for him to be extended, but the idea that is still out there is kind of interesting. But I want to move on to these actual trade talks now, because right now you can see the San Jose Sharks lineup. We're not ready to compete yet. I mean, we see the young guys up in the lineup. We're seeing Will Smith playing with Granlund. That's maybe one aspect you're like, oh, geez, if you move Granlund, you want Will Smith to be playing with someone good. Maybe you see him back a little bit with Celebrini. I don't know. That 70s line's working well. But there's a couple teams that Dave Pagnotta linked to the Sharks' star player in Mikael Granlund. And the first one's the Dallas Stars. And I just want to have a look at this lineup. Now, what they could send back to San Jose, not sure. Probably a first-round pick and maybe even something else, because Granlund is he's going to be in demand, so there's going to be a bit of a bidding war. But looking at this team, Casey, I mean, obviously there's a Finnish connection with Granlund being named one of the alternate captains for the Four Nations. You got teammates like Rupe Hintz there. You got Heiskanen as well, though he won't be playing in the Four Nations. Look, if Granlund's going to go anywhere, I mean, look, I'm focused more on what Dallas could bring back to San Jose. And hey, if they put Sagan on LTIR until playoffs, Granlund could maybe even fit in there without too much cap shenanigans, because the Sharks don't have a retention spot. But Dallas is one of those teams that I think could very well want Granlund, and that would also make him very scary.
Yeah, if Granny goes to the Dallas Stars, I don't want to be on the opposite end of the ice, because this team is going to be scary. And going into playoffs, I wouldn't want to be matched up against them in a 7-game series. No way.
No.
But the one thing that interests me here about a Granlund trade to Dallas is that you would have to see him shift into a winger role here because they're really deep down the center. Yes, you could maybe make the case that he could play second line center. You can shift the lines down, move Hintz to the fourth line. But I think that to keep more star power in your hands throughout your lineup, I think maybe switching either one of these guys to a winger, but I do think Granlund would work well on the wing because yes, he has been sub 50% face-off percentage this season. So moving him to the wing isn't that bad of an idea.
He's played it before.
Yeah, he's been a winger before in his career, so it makes sense for this to happen. And I think that if you even put him in on this third line here, and with a guy like Stankoven, man, I think Stankoven is a tremendous player, and he's only so young. He's like in his early 20s, I believe, and this is a guy who really made a name for himself with this Dallas team last year. So if you get Granlund down there, a guy who's been such a great playmaker this year, I think this line could really start to go off. Obviously, the Finnish connection is there as well, Josh, but there is another team that we did mention, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this is the team I really like to talk about because it gets interesting here in Toronto. I mean, if we just take a look at this lineup right now, without John Tavares in the lineup on IR right now, it is going to be tough for the Maple Leafs down that center role. I mean, they're playing Holmberg, who was an AHLer last year, as their second-line center, so they could really use a guy in Mikael Granlund here down the center role, and I think if you trade for him, I think he could easily beat out John Tavares when he comes back for the second line center role. I think him and William Nylander would have such a great connection. Yeah. They'd be a very good 1-2 punch for this team, and we would see Granlund's numbers go up higher and higher on a higher production rate than he is right now if he's playing with those players, in my opinion. I think this Toronto Maple Leafs team is looking for a way to win the Stanley Cup or even just get out of the first or second round at this point. And I think going out, getting Granny, a 32-year-old vet who has that experience that he can bring to this locker room as well, would definitely be a good fit for them. But the big thing that interests me about this for the Sharks side of this trade is there's a guy here on this third line right wing that interests me a lot, and that's Nick Robertson. Obviously, this is a guy who is 23 years old. He's still young, and a lot of people in Toronto have tore a strip out of this guy, to put some Newfie slang on you, because he hasn't produced as well as what people thought he would have. And Austin Matthews at one point said he has the best shot on the team. So there is something there, and we just haven't seen it yet. He has 12 points in 43 games this season. And Josh, I think bringing this guy to the San Jose Sharks could really help him out of the funk he's in right now. I know there's a lot of people saying maybe he's a little too small, but I think I really like this guy. I think his career could really get a good rejuvenation here in San Jose.
I think a lot of fans are already typing the too small comments, saying the Sharks probably could use to get a bit bigger. And while I don't necessarily disagree, I like to look at it in terms of what the value is for a guy like Granlund coming back, right? So your options are you're not going to let him walk for nothing. You're going to either trade him or extend him. He's not going to leave in UFA. That's not what's going to happen here. So if you trade a guy like Granlund, it's going to come down to what teams are willing to give for him. And like I said, there's going to be a bidding war. But you made a great point in that Toronto could really use some extra help down the middle, maybe arguably more so than Dallas could, right? And we've heard even Carolina has been in the market for a nice center who could help their power play. Some other teams we'll get into in other videos, I'm sure. But Toronto's one of those teams that we know likes to be active, likes to go get some bigger name players. I mean, look at the guys they got on their roster right now, right? Like, they like scoring, and bringing a guy like Granlund immediately, whether he takes that 2C role from Tavares or not heading into the playoffs, either way, he's going to be impactful for this team. So to get him, though, they know they'd have to outbid other teams. Now, there might have to be some weird cap stuff because, again, Sharks can't retain anything. Maybe there'd have to be a third party. I don't really know the Leafs cap situation that well, but if they can make it happen, they might try and do it. Maybe you toss Nick Robertson and a second-round pick, as suggested in that Athletic article that we will link down below for you guys. That could maybe do it. I mean, a young prospect, he's, I guess, hard to say prospect anymore because Robertson's, 22, 23 years old now. He's been really battered with injuries, but I think the potential's there for him. And even getting a guy that could really have a rejuvenation to his career on a new team could be one of the things that the Sharks could really get. You never know if Nick Robertson turns into like maybe a perennial 50-point player. if that's what he ends up being, and you have him locked down for 3, 4, 5 years because you're an RFA, and you end up getting that for an expiring Mikael Granlund, that could be worth it. But there's a lot of other talks. I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Would you want someone like a Nick Robertson from the Leafs? Did the Leafs even make sense? What is Mike Grier going to go out and do trying to move Mikael Granlund around? I don't think he'll get extended, but there's teams more than just the Stars or the Leafs. I want to hear your trade proposals. What would you want for Mikael Granlund? Would you want a first-round pick? Do you want a prospect in a second? So many options. We'd love to hear from you, but that'll do it for this episode of Sharks Digest. If you enjoyed, you made it over 10 minutes into this video, and you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing. We got all the latest Sharks news. Heading into the deadline, we'll be having updates on everything coming out about the Sharks, so if you want to stay up to date, hit the button down below. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, KC. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.